What's good? All right, so this video, we're going to talk about action games introducing new protagonists and why they do it, and kind of discuss on if Yakumo is a good addition or a bad addition. And again, like we haven't played the game yet, just going off what we can see, but we can glean a lot of information just based on like what we've seen with his gameplay, and we're going to compare it to some other instances where very popular protagonists were not necessarily replaced, but where an additional character was introduced to walk alongside them. And the most obvious instances are going to be Devil May Cry 4 and Bayonetta 3 with Nero and Viola respectively. So we're also going to talk about Razor's Edge. So why do devs introduce new protagonists? Well, there's a few reasons. Um, One of the main reasons they do this is because they want to introduce something fresh into the game's mechanics. And when you have a character that's so established, like Ryu or Dante, and you try to alter the game's mechanics in a significant way or introduce new ideas into this protagonist, it makes the protagonist feel off to a lot of players. And we've seen this throughout Ninja Gaiden. Like when Ninja Gaiden 2 first came out, the Ninja Gaiden Black fans didn't really like it. And they eventually, got over it. And then when Ninja Gaiden 3 came out, the, Ninja Gaiden 2 fans didn't like it. Also, something that I think is really funny that you see fairly often with games is when there's sequels or series or even devs putting out new games that aren't a sequel, players will like a game, the next one will come out, everybody will talk shit about it. Then the next game will come out, and then suddenly that game they were talking shit about is pretty good. And now the new game is the one they talk shit about. It's just a weird fucking phenomena that you see with video games, sequels, and developers that, are famous for certain genres. So I get, a lot of people hated, talk shit about Razor's Edge, a lot of the NG2 fans, but now that we've seen NG4, they're like lumping NG3 into like, it's not so bad already, which I just think is funny. But anyways, that's just a side tangent. But we already saw this with Razor's Edge with Ninja Gaiden, and basically Ninja Gaiden has always done this. Like they tried to change things up with 2. The NGB fans didn't like it initially, and then people ended up liking it. Ninja Gaiden 3, obviously, like Vanilla 3 the game wasn't finished when it was released essentially. Razor's Edge was already like under production before Vanilla 3 was released. So they released it in a state they knew was bad, and obviously they took a lot of the criticism and put that into Razor's Edge that they were already working on. But we see that with 3, right? Like Ryu changed significantly. He has this dash now. He has mechanics like this where they tried to introduce stealth mechanics into the game. There's the entire way you deal with enemies is significantly different. In Ninja Gaiden Black, there was a mix, and that's why NGB is just the best overall game, because there was this mix of defense and offense from enemies. You had enemies like cat fiends that were super offensive. You even had enemies like, your IS ninja, which were more on the offensive side. Then you had some enemies that were very defensive, basically any sort of like armored soldier in the game. And, different enemies would have to be approached certain ways. With cat fiends, you had to play a lot more defensive and reactionary, where with armored commandos, you had to, wind path them, smoke bomb them, do something to kind of break their guard. You couldn't just walk up and flying swallow them or whatever. And there was this mix of offense and defense. Then we saw Ninja Gaiden 2 come out, and defense was basically thrown out the window, and enemies were just fully offensive, which is, they had to like counteract that somehow and make the player vulnerable and not just able to, flying swallow around or Azuna drop to their heart's content. So, there's a lot of incendiaries, shuriken explosions and rocket launcher explosions and explosive arrows, and there's always shit exploding at you, because that's the main thing that prevents you from just flying around cutting everybody into pieces. Also, like on landings are punished, and they kind of like they went too far in that direction. And that's why in like 2 Black and Sigma 2 removing that aspect from the game makes it, much easier. Then in Razor's Edge, they went the complete opposite direction in, a very aggressive way. Enemies are super defensive. They introduced, the steel on bow mechanic. But if you look at like how you're fighting enemies, they're they're super defensive, right? Like these enemies are literally invisible. And I'm cheesing them here essentially. I was low on health, so I just, used what I could, but basically just spamming Y with the Kusa is enough to break their guard, and basically any like AoE type of hit will bring them out of their invisibility state. Then we have enemies like alchemists who again are super defensive. They have shields you have to break. They have all these mechanics around them, and a lot of players didn't like this change. They thought it didn't feel like Ninja Gaiden. I say Razor's Edge still very much feels like Ninja Gaiden. It has all of the classic aspects of Ninja Gaiden, which are basically having to deal with crowd control, the aggressive, like brutal nature of the combat, the gore. Um, you're not just like spamming offensive combos. You have to be defensive and worry about your positioning and all of those things that set Ninja Gaiden apart that we've talked about in previous videos. But with Razor's Edge, they tried to introduce some new ideas and correct for NG2's mistakes, but they went, like too hard in that direction with enemy defense to make it challenging versus um, having just constant explosions at you, essentially, right? So this is what happens when devs try to like alter things and introduce new things into the gameplay. And within G4, they need to do the same thing. So we'll come back to that. We're gonna shelf that for a second. Now let's look at like Devil May Cry 4. So again, obviously they felt that they wanted to try some new things out, but Dante has an identity, and you can't just alter Dante too significantly. So they introduced Nero, and maybe they had other reasons for introducing Nero, but this is typically like the main reason for doing it. And Nero was not well received. Now Nero is well received, but on release, like I think people have short memories. Like Nero was not very well received for a couple of reasons. The main reason is DMC4 is just like a significantly like it's an unfinished game, right? It doesn't feel good. You play half of a game. That's what people tend to say. I don't like repeating tropes, but it's true. Like it's basically like half a game, and then you run through it again with Dante, and then it's just the same bosses with Nero. So you fight the same bosses 3 times. Nero is extremely limited with his moveset compared to Dante. He has one weapon. You can't do any weapon switching. His combos are extremely limited in DMC4 as well. Like, yeah, good players can still like pull cool shit off with him, but he is extremely limited compared to Dante. That is just not even something you can try to argue with. And it feels like Nero wasn't really polished, and that like goes into the feel of DMC4 feeling like an unfinished game. Nero didn't feel complete. The game didn't feel complete. And this introduction of Nero, it's like, why, right? Like, what did he add to this game? His gameplay mechanics weren't enough to really like set him apart or make him feel good. Obviously, in DMC5, I think Nero feels really good, and it's not just the little Buster Arm things. Like his entire moveset feels more fluid. He has more combos. You don't need turbo mode to not feel like you're like slogging around with him. But the point is, this is what happens when it's done in like a sloppy way. And I'm not meaning that they did like specifically do Nero well, but DMC4 in a lot of ways was just not like a well-made game. I know people, the really hardcore DMC fans really love it, but they don't think it's not their favorite game because it's a great game. It's their favorite game because Dante has some really specific tech like inertia and distortion and shit like that like only the best players in the world can even fucking start to touch, right? So the reason people really love DMC4 isn't because of Nero or because of the great game. It's because of Dante's specific tech. Then if we look at Bayonetta 3, This is a game that did this so aggressively. They wanted to introduce new mechanics to Bayo because Bayo 2 was the same thing as Bayo 1. The weapons, some things were better, some things were worse, right? There's a lot of tech people that was removed from 1 that people don't like, but objectively, enemy designs were better, enemy variety was better, the weapons were better, the same weapons felt better to use, like you had more combos, like the whip was just faster and felt better. So it made a bunch of like positive steps and a bunch of like negative steps, but overall, like Bayo 1 and 2 are the same game for all intents and purposes. Like they feel pretty much the same. There was no innovation to Bayonetta. So in Bayonetta 3, they do this in two ways. First of all, they completely alter the gameplay, and this has positives and negatives. There is like you have shit like this, which is just fucking dumb. You also have um these transformations, which are also just a dumb gimmick in this aspect, like platforming around on them. It's a dumb spectacle. Like I don't think anybody really enjoys it. There is some like I think Bayo 3 probably has the most combat complexity when you look at trying to like all of the demon slave offsets and the different way you can like introduce demon slave into dodge offset, and it feels it's very hard to pull off high level gameplay in Bayo 3, and I think technically, like on a technical level, it's harder to be good at Bayo 3 than any of the other games. So there is more depth probably maybe, but also it completely changed how Bayo plays, right? She has one weapon on just one weapon. You can't equip hand and feet weapons. It introduced the demon slave mechanics, and just overall the combat feels very different. It feels familiar, but it feels very different. And this is what happened when devs feel like they need to introduce new mechanics into a game. It ends up not feeling like what you want, and it hurts the franchise. And some people love Bayo 3, some people don't. It is what it is. Then we get to the new character who suffers from neuro disease, and neuro disease is basically being like a not fleshed out character who is extremely limited. Bro, what is this fucking like ridiculously long ad? Where she is ridiculous, extremely limited compared to the main protagonist counterpart, right? Viola, just like Nero, only has one weapon. Her combat doesn't really feel great. It's not bad, but when you're playing Viola, you're like, Jesus Christ, I wish I could be playing Bayonetta. Plus, her character just kind of sucks in my opinion. I don't like her design. Like, Bayo and Jean are these sexy, like, badass women, and then she's like an angry teenage lesbian or something. I really don't understand what they were going for with her. Even when she does her little, like, break the where Bale will like blow a kiss. Like, look at this. This is fucking absurd. When Bale blows a kiss when you like finish an encounter or whatever, and it like breaks the seal, she gives this stupid like I'm trying to be a badass rock star look, and even the like music is just super just cringe, and it's not done well. They wanted to introduce new things into the game. They wanted to introduce a new gameplay style, and it feels half-baked. Her combat has no variety. I at least for me, I've never taken the time to get good with her, but I just feel like I'm spamming combos just hoping to get it over with. So when we look at Nero and Viola, they are consequences of them not fleshing out these characters to the same degree that the initial protagonist was fleshed out. And then, obviously with Bayo 3, the other combat changes are similar to like the Razor's Edge changes, right? Like they're trying to just change the gameplay in some way to make it different and feel better, but it works for some people it doesn't. Same with Razor's Edge. Razor's Edge has the most complex, technically combat complex combat system in Ninja Gaiden, but some people don't like it. Now let's look at Yakumo. Yakumo is the complete antithesis to this. Yakumo is more fleshed out in Ninja Gaiden 4 than the launch version of Ryu, and this rubs people wrong in the other direction. right? Because why did Yakumo get more love than Ryu? And when it comes to the DLC weapons, we don't know why that is, right? Like it's shitty, but like blaming Team Ninja isn't necessarily the right thing to do for like first of all, this game is run by Xbox, right? Like obviously Xbox doesn't get any like say in how development is going, but they control marketing, pricing, DLC, shit like that. So, you know, Team Ninja has always introduced DLC like this in ways, but also like Xbox is involved, and Xbox is also super scummy. So, we don't know if this is Team Ninja's scumminess, Xbox's scumminess, the fact that Team Ninja just didn't have the time and Platinum just didn't have the time to get Yakumo fleshed out and like develop Ryu's weapons the way they wanted to by release, but they wanted to do it, so they, waited. They have to wait to release them just because it's not ready yet, which is something that happens in games, right? Things aren't like look at Razor's Edge. Razor's Edge legit had to release, or Vanilla 3 had to legit release like unfinished. Ninja Gaiden 2 had to release unfinished. Both of those games like weren't fleshed out games on their release. And that it just is what it is. But anyways, like it sucks, but we don't know why, right? But the point is, we don't know if Ryu is going to be as fleshed out as Yakumo in the end, right? Like I mentioned before, if we only get like the claws of the dual swords with him, it's gonna really like suck. If Ryu gets like around 4 to 5 good, cool weapons, maybe even one new weapon that we've never seen before, then Ryu will be fleshed out and Yakumo will be fleshed out. Yakumo looks to have more mechanical depth than any Ryu we've ever seen. Like they have put a lot of love into Yakumo, and I really don't understand like people trying to say he plays like I've talked about before, right? He doesn't look like a Metal Gear Ride like metal. He doesn't look like that. He doesn't look like a fucking platinum character. Like his visual design, sure. The little kanji after his execution, sure. But the way this dude plays, like clearly plays like a Ninja Gaiden character. And they have put a lot of love into making sure he, you know, plays well and plays like Ninja Gaiden. Like, look at this. This is this. If you saw this clip and he was wearing fucking Ryu's costume, nobody would be saying this looks like a Platinum Games or he looks like a shitty character. Like, it looks fucking good. So, why was Yakumo introduced? Well, a few reasons. One, it's been over a decade since we've had a Ninja Gaiden game. Both Team Ninja and Platinum would want. So, first of all, let's look at it from Team Ninja's perspective. Of course, they're going to want to evolve the combat system. But when they tried to do that significantly with Ninja Gaiden 3, it wasn't very successful, right? They tried to completely change how Ryu was, and they had backlash from it, even though the combat system was extremely well done. Second, let's look at like Platinum's involvement. Platinum's going to want to introduce their ideas into it, and obviously Yakumo definitely has some Platinum like influence. That doesn't mean he plays like a fucking platinum character because he doesn't. But obviously there's some like influence with, like he's super flashy, he's faster, he's quicker, all that kind of shit, right? We have the little kanjis after the executions. Blood Raven was like, so when there was a developer interview about this, and they said when Platinum initially presented the idea of Yakumo as like the new character to Team Ninja. Team Ninja shot it down and said no. Like what you have here is not Ninja Gaiden. Like, and they had to work together to tweak it and change him to make him like a Ninja Gaiden character, because the initial version of him, Team Ninja just essentially rejected and said, no, that's not what we're going to put into Ninja Gaiden. And that's what people need to understand. Team Ninja calls the shots. Yasuda calls the shots. And there's a co-director, the dude who directed Wolong is all like co-directing with the Platinum guy. And then Yasuda's ahead of both of them. So, and then Koei Tecmo as well is like heavily involved on the production end. So it's not just like Platinum making the game or whatever. Like they're doing a lot of the like dirty work, but Team Ninja is controlling the direction and the process. Same with Blood Raven form. They said when Blood Raven form was, you know, initially like in its initial conception stages, that it was too strong, it was too over the top, and they had to like severely tone it down to make it feel more like Ninja Gaiden. And Blood Raven form is the I don't know how people can hate on it because it's the best addition to Ninja Gaiden in I don't know how long. Obviously, a ninja needs ninjutsu, right? And Ryu's Nimpo kind of, like back in 2004, 2005, like yeah, whatever, right? Like you press a button, you watch some cool shit happen, shit dies, whatever. But nowadays, Nimpo feels bad to use, and most players, like good players, severely limit their Nimpo usage because it's just you press a button and you know you wipe the fucking screen, and that's not challenging, it's not fun, you're not incorporating it. Yakumo's Blood Raven form actually incorporating his ninjutsu into his combat and being something that's like a risk reward type of thing, because you're going to run into enemies, elite enemies that are super defensive and that block a lot, and you need to break their guard. You're going to need Blood Raven gauge to do this. So if you know, spend your Blood Raven on the fodder enemies and then you don't have it for the elites, you're going to be fucked. And same with like the berserker mode and shit like that, right? Which is why in like all this gameplay we don't really see these players using a lot of Blood Raven form. It's not something they're just busting out in the middle of combat for like no reason. They're specifically using it to break enemies' guards or to deal with like very like ridiculous situations where you have, you know, a bunch of enemies that are surrounding you or something like that. But they're not just like it's not just like press the button and win type of a thing. Yes, they do still have that aspect. If you combine Berserker with Blood Raven, it'll essentially wipe the room, but then your meter's gone, right? It's not like Nimpo where you get fucking 5 casts of it and then you have refills of it. You just take a fucking, you know, devil's elixir and there's your Nimpo right back, and you can buy as many of these shits as you want, right? So like Blood Raven form is a really good mechanic that I am fucking stoked for. And I don't know how more people don't see how smart and good of a mechanic Blood Raven form actually fucking is, because it's brilliant and much better than Impo. So this is like the opposite of what we've seen in the previous games. They wanted to, it's the same where they wanted to like introduce something new, but they didn't want to completely change Ryu. So you make Yakumo, you still make it feel like NG, and then you give him some new combat options, right? He has weapons we've never seen. He has transformations. He has Blood Raven form. That introduces new, fun, cool mechanics and ways to play Ninja Gaiden without ruining Ryu and making Ryu feel out of place like Bayonetta 3 or whatever, right? Like Ryu still is fucking Ryu here. And again, it's really gonna come down to how, and fuck the money, that's not the point of this. It's really gonna come down to how fleshed out Ryu feels in the end. Like, are you able to do a Master Ninja chapter challenge run with Ryu and have the same replayability as you are with Yakumo? If the answer is no, then that's a problem, because Ryu was essentially an afterthought. In the other games, the new character was an afterthought. Viola feels like an afterthought. Nero 4 felt like an afterthought. He doesn't in 5, but Nero 4 felt like an afterthought. And we can't have Ryu feeling like a fucking afterthought. So I understand that that criticism and complaint, like, bro, Ryu cannot be like an afterthought, but saying he's an afterthought now is disingenuous. We need to wait and see, right? And like, I'm going to have faith that, and yeah, you have to buy the DLC again. That's not the fucking point. I am gonna have faith that they're gonna give him a decent enough of a toolkit to make him feel fully fleshed out. And I don't like use every weapon in all the games. There's multiple weapons that feel redundant. Like when you look at like Ninja Gaiden Black, the Debilero UF, I guess, had a cool mechanic, but the Debilero UF and Dark Dragon Blade were essentially redundant. The flails are just a better version of the nunchucks, essentially. The chucks are just like the unupgraded version. The Katetsu and Plasma Saber are basically just another dragon sword. So really you have the lunar, the flails, a great sword, and a sword. And those were like your main weapons in NGB, right? Then NG2 obviously gave us a lot, but some weapons I don't care if we don't see again. I don't care if we don't see a Kusa again. I honestly would hope that one of the weapons isn't going to be a dual sword, but I'm almost convinced that weapon is going to be the fucking dual sword, which kind of breaks my heart. But again, as long as Ryu gets like 5 weapons, like, right? Claws, lunar, dragon sword. I'd love to see him get the tonfas back, flails, something. As long as there's like 5 weapons for him, and maybe they introduce like a new Nimpo or something. Because right now it looks like we have Inferno, Piercing Void, Wind Blades, and basically the Ninja Gaiden 2 Nimpo, right? And the other thing that they're doing in this game, which I don't know how people like don't understand, they're taking, at least from the looks of it, like the good things from other games. Like the way you can like OT and UT and kind of like throw the enemies around and quickly delimb them and shit is very comparable to NG2. The way defensive enemies are is very comparable to NG1, right? Like we see the big defensive elite enemies in this game, just like NG1 had with the ogres and the berserkers and all those fucking the big dino T-Rex looking motherfuckers. That's just kind of like, how they introduced like big elite enemies. NG2 didn't do this really. Like you had Van Gelfs, but Van Gelfs were still just fucking delim quickly die, right? Like they're not nothing special. One UT or ET and they're dead, right? And there were like I guess some red dinos at one part, and you did have like the marionettes kind of, but NG2 completely ditched that concept. And it's good to see like that aspect of NG1 back. And it's good to see like the aggressiveness of NG2 back, because in Razor's Edge, you could not be aggressive like in the same way as NG2, because every enemy was super defensive, and like the defensive mechanics are very convoluted in Razor's Edge. People bitch way too hard about it. It can be learned and dealt with, and it's a lot of fun to learn. It's hard to learn. That doesn't make it bad. Like the thing with like NG2 is, and NG1 even, like it's so straightforward. There's not like you can approach pretty much every situation the exact same way in NG2. In Razor's Edge, like you can't. You have to learn to how to break enemies guard, how to bloody them, when to switch from one enemy to the next. When one enemy starts being evasive and dodging your combos, what do? You mix in the bow, you fucking move to a new enemy, you try to guillotine throw, it might miss, but who cares? In NG2, your guillotine throw never misses. Just because it's not like a 100% win rate doesn't make it fucking bad, right? So, and again here, like, look at this. We're seeing the same aspects of crowd control. God, I wish he did an impo here. I really do. The perfect dodge, it isn't like ruining like his aspect of positioning and shit. He's still wind pathing. He's still getting dudes out of the way. He's still guillotine throwing. He's still doing like everything we love Ryu to do, or everything we want Ninja Gaiden to do, right? So protagonists aren't always introduced well. When developers try to change the gameplay, it's not always done well or not always received properly. But Ninja Gaiden 4 like really seems to be doing this the right way. A new protagonist that isn't an afterthought, the old protagonist, and both of them not it didn't change gameplay like significantly. Like this isn't putting a bunch of dumb fucking gimmicks into the game. It's not changing how you have to approach combat. It's not fucking doing any of that. This is straight up like what you expect from Ninja Gaiden. And I don't know how so many people are so fucking blind to that and saying it's like, more platinum than NG. I just can't fucking get over that. Like I just really can't. This is exactly what I wanted to see from this game. Like I said before, when I saw platinum was like helping with it, I was fucking angry. I was pissed. I was like, dude, no. Why are they going to ruin this? Why are they going to ruin it? But now that, I've seen enough footage, I know that they didn't ruin it, and they did what they should do. They did it properly. They did it right. Team Ninja, and reading the developer interviews about Team Ninja still in charge. Well, the lead platinum guy, also was, a huge Ninja Gaiden fan and wanted to make sure to preserve the essence of the game and blah blah. Even though they couldn't do that with Bayonetta, but it is what it is. But again, maybe that's me being a little disingenuous there too, because like a lot of people still love Bayonetta 3's gameplay. The story aspects are another fucking thing, but nobody really gives a shit about the story and badass action games. So yeah, again, I don't you know the way they're trying to introduce new mechanics and introduce new characters is not being handled the same as DMC4 or Bayonetta 3. They're doing it really does seem like they've learned from these types of mistakes and are doing it the proper way. And like I said, the one caveat of that is making sure Ryu feels like a fleshed out character when it's all said and done. When we get Ninja Gaiden 4 Complete Edition, Ninja Gaiden 4 Black, whatever the fuck they're gonna want to call it, and you have everything that the game has to offer, that Ryu feels complete, then it's not the opposite of DMC4. It's not the opposite of AO3. Then it's just a net positive because we have a complete Ryu we can play the game with, and we have a complete Yakumo that we can play the game with. Both play like Ninja Gaiden characters, and Yakumo has a completely new, fully developed toolkit that they clearly put a lot of love and effort into. Like, no matter what you want to say, like, they clearly put the time and energy to making sure Yakumo has a good toolkit, a unique toolkit, but still is a Ninja Gaiden character, and that's like exactly what they should do. So I think they're doing it right. I hope they're doing it right. I hope I don't, eat my words. But the only way I could eat my words at this point, with all of the like gameplay we have seen, is two things: if Master Ninja is handled poorly, if the difficulty is too easy, or three things: if Ryu isn't a good character when it's all said and done. But I can't make those judgments yet because I haven't played the fucking game. But yeah, thanks for coming to my rant, and check you later. Peace.